Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. For those who are new, the goal of the show was to share game-changing stories that our guests are experiencing with themselves, their team, or what they're seeing in the industry. And many salespeople today are struggling with their outbound approach. And if you think about it, it's like a push system. So they're pushing their message, their product, their service onto their prospects. And it's difficult to break through the online noise. So as a result, they're turning to more of a pull system where they're drawing their prospects into them through an inbound approach, typically content creation. And they're creating content to increase visibility, to generate some leads, but also that when they're being searched, that they're coming up on that first page of Google. But how do they do that? How do they ensure that the content they're creating is driving the SEO results that they need? And to help me answer that question, I'm delighted to welcome Chris Herbert to the podcast. Now, Chris is co-founder of Silicon Halton and he's CEO of MI6 Marketing Agency. And Chris is passionate about reinventing how people can help each other and exchange meaningful value in their professional and personal lives. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Karen. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So am I. And Chris, it's a very timely one with all the online noise and the frustration in trying to compete with it and seeing ultimately that a lot of times it's unfortunately not getting people the results they're looking for. So I'm excited to be talking about inbound marketing and really how that drives the SEO results, and then diving deeper into SEO and strategies and tactics and really how to get started in that. But before we go there, why don't you just share a little bit of your sales and marketing background to kind of help us understand, what got you to be the CEO of MI6 today?
Sure. Well, I've been a lover of technology and a lover of marketing and sales for, let's say 30 odd years now. I enjoy the whole discipline of helping people discover businesses, discover companies that are there to provide solutions to problems. I've always been a student of marketing and sales since I was going to college. And when I was very young, before I even got into sales and marketing, I was a squash professional. And you may wonder, well, what has that got to do with MI6 and Silicon Halton? But you'd be surprised, because when I was very young, as I said, I was very interested in technology and building relationships with people. And as a squash professional, when you're teaching people how to play and you're organizing all these clinics and events and leagues, you get to know people probably more intimately as customers than, perhaps sitting behind a screen in today's day and age. So what I was able to do was combine my love of providing good customer service as a squash professional with technology, where I ended up building a database of all my players. So I was able to know what their playing preferences were, what their skill levels were. And that really got me onto the whole idea of really effectively, if you will, marketing and selling to your customers through technology and databases. So that is what sort of got me started into marketing. I started to learn how to market to customers in ways that they appreciated being marketing to, based on what they needed, what they wanted, what they enjoyed. And it also taught me one other really important thing, which is the concept of building a network. Sometimes you'll hear that term community. And but a network is so important in today's business landscape, whether it's your professional network or it's a network you're building around your brand or your business. It's no longer about customer lists. Even though you'll hear that, how big's your opt-in list? How many followers do you have? You have to sort of ascend beyond lists to who do you have in your network that is either a customer, an influencer, that sort of thing. So to cut this story a bit shorter, I'll tell you how I got into technology marketing, because that's kind of where I ended up before I started MI6. It all came from squash, believe it or not. I knew a particular member who I was able to confide in, said, look, I'm thinking to get out of being a squash pro and getting into marketing. I love it. Do you know anybody who's in the technology industry and marketing? And it turned out his wife was. She ended up interviewing me and hiring me. And that's when I started doing marketing for technology companies. So fast forward to, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I ended up, going out on my own again. I'd worked for a couple of technology companies, really enjoyed it, and decided, hey, the entrepreneurial bug was impossible to ignore. And I strived out and started MI6. And MI6 is a B2B marketing agency, pretty much focused in on companies that what I consider are sort of high consideration sale companies, where there's a little more to it than just going online and ordering something. You have to become familiar with the company, understand the problems they solve, get to know the people a little bit before you make a commitment to buying something. So I call those high consideration sales. And I was intrigued by helping companies, especially in the B2B space, who had that complexity baked into the way that they had to market and sell their products and services. So one of the things that I thought I should do is, hey, if I want to, at that point in time, we were just focused in on getting technology companies as customers. I said, well, maybe the best thing I can do is, give back to the technology community and over time, volunteer, and over time, some of those technology entrepreneurs that I'd helped out through an association or a nonprofit would come back and say, hey, Chris, you did some great things for us, and you did a presentation on technology marketing to our association. We'd like to hire you. So I couldn't really get involved with any of these associations for various reasons. So I started one, and I started Silicon Halton, and the idea was to bring people together in Halton region who are interested in technology together to learn from each other and grow that way. And today we're actively involved helping not just technology companies grow through primarily inbound marketing, but investment banks, law firms, higher education institutions, that sort of thing. And it's been a lot of fun. And I met you through Silicon Halton.
I know. What a great community that was, because we absolutely met through Silicon Halton. And I didn't know you were a squash professional. That's amazing. I love squash. I played squash, but it's more to take out my aggression after a long day. But if you look back at the foreshadowing, where you said you combined, the customer service element with also the tech. And who would have thought, as a squash professional, that you started designing a database to track analytics and I think even that feeds into the customer service, because the more you know and can track about your player, the better the relationship's going to be, the better the progression's going to be. And it shows, again, in everything you do, that you're just others focused, you're customers focused. But then you have the data to support it and drive it. And I think that's the big piece there is, otherwise it's subjective, right? And introducing the data allows it to be objective.
Yeah. And back then, Don Peppers, I've forgotten the lady that wrote the book with him, Martha Rogers, they had written a book on one-to-one marketing, and it was all relationship-driven marketing. It was all built around, getting to know your customer at the one-to-one level. And that really stuck with me. And we continue to look at, how do you understand your customers and your prospects to a degree that goes beyond the mass market, and what tools do you use in order to understand your customers better and your prospects better? So relationship-driven marketing, in my view, will always be a jewel to have in your marketing program and your marketing plan is how do you get to that level where you're developing legitimate relationships with your customers. It's not easy, but the data drives it, and the way in which that data is gathered in such a way that it's not inobtrusive. It's something that the customers believe is of value to share with you. That's the challenge today because of what's happened in the last 5 or 10 years in terms of information that's being gathered unbeknownst to users online, as an example. So
yeah, and that is a challenge, but also, Chris, that shows your intention. Like when your focus is relationship and that one-on-one. A lot of people in the pandemic, the whole message was let's bring it back to the basics. And for me, that never left in a pandemic. You always need to be one-on-one. You always need to nurture that relationship. And that comes with playing the long game. Like it's not going to come, overnight, building that trust and demonstrating that you're truly in it for the right reasons. And I think, the pandemic, it's kind of moved it away and everyone's looking to scale. They're looking for these quick wins and they're just throwing tech at everything. And it moves you so far away from that core. For me, those are fundamentals, that one-to-one, that because I think now you can chase 100, but I'd rather chase 5 and get those solid 5 that I know are in my target audience. I know I can help them. And we have that relationship, and it takes time. But those are the ones that are going to be with you forever. So what are you seeing, Chris? Just to elaborate on that, we know there's a lot of outbound and people are kind of pitching and messaging, and there's just so much noise with everybody working remote, and as a result of the pandemic, that I'm seeing a lot of people really shift the gears into an inbound approach, whether through content creation, a blog, a newsletter, something, but it's still tailored and it's ultimately designed to attract those people so you can start building that long-term relationship. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing a shift from outbound to inbound? Has it been a gradual shift? Has it been accelerated as a result of the pandemic, or what are you seeing there?
Well, I can speak mostly to what we're seeing with new clients that have come on board recently, but it is supported based on, I think, common sense. So traditional ways of generating business in the past, wasn't just digital, especially, for example, if you were a partner in an investment firm or at a law firm, just as an example. Regardless of the industry, though, there were things that you would do and you'd been doing for many, many years, like go to trade shows, have meetings, go to conferences, where you would have that physical interaction with prospective customers, with existing customers. There would also be the sharing of information of some sort, but it was in a physical environment. So in some cases, especially in B2B, a large part of the marketing budget still was for events, mostly physical events. So then we're hit with a pandemic and everybody's kind of going, what do we do now? And I think in some cases, some folks were behind considerably in terms of what they could do in place of it. And the only answer today is digital. So there are 2 ways in which you can market digitally. One is outbound, which is pushing content out. Traditionally, that's been email marketing. That's been, in some cases, account managers, for example, who have maybe 50 key accounts that they're targeting, sending more emails out, still calling, obviously, now having Zoom sessions. But again, that's push-based marketing where the agenda and the timing and the messaging is really in the mind and, focused in mostly on the seller. Whereas with inbound marketing, it's really around, in my view, what people are looking for. And I know we're going to get into this a little later, but, generally that starts with things like search. Social is a part of it. but it's a bit different in terms of what you do with social. But again, fundamentally, a lot of people, especially senior level people who may not, run the marketing department but own a business, are thinking, how can we be relevant? How can we be, known? How can people remember us? How do people find us? How do we get business? So there are some companies that had already adopted inbound marketing and perhaps shifted their budgets more to inbound. But I'm seeing a lot of small to mid-sized businesses that just really don't know what to do and where to start.
Yeah, interesting. And I would agree the outbound, there's still, I still think there's definitely an opportunity for it, but it is seller focused. And I think this is when you think about the art and science of sales is, you have to craft an email that is others focused and generally. And I just say, if your first sentence is I or we, like you've got it wrong, so if the customer is reading that, it just supports the need for or the lack of intention or focus on the customer. Was when they see that, it's just kind of that holds us down in that negative connotation with salespeople, and it's frustrating for them, and it's frustrating for me doing what I do, seeing that that's still going on. But I like what you say about inbound, that it is a digital approach, it's digital first, and I think when you're putting out content that's relevant, what it allows your customer to do is consume it when they're ready. They know where to find you. They know that if they're consistently following you, that it's solid content. And you start getting, I think it's like watching a show. Like every Thursday, if this is on, like I'm going to watch it, because they've got you. You've kind of you've demonstrated your credibility. You've demonstrated that you're others focused, and you're continuing to deposit with no ask, right? And then when it comes time for that withdrawal, you've kind of earned the right to do that. So I think that's a great approach.
Yeah, and if I may, the idea of sending an email out. So yeah, it's outbound. It's an outbound tactic, but the thing to think about is you kind of want them to want to hear from you as opposed to you wanting to tell them something. So, things like the types of things you email as a company versus individuals, and what you say and what you're asking for in return for them, reading your email are really important, and you should be mindful of that. So you kind of, so frequency. So do you send an email out every week? No, not necessarily. You want it so that people want to hear from you and they actually appreciate hearing from you. So not only are they waiting to hear from you, but then what you say in that email, whether it's a newsletter or whether it's just a follow-up or something like that, that they're going to be a little more appreciative of wanting to hear from you. That's something that's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of piquing their curiosity and almost intriguing them. Like you got to give them something for them to want to come back to. And I just see too often, this, what is some of the words they say, I'm just checking in to make sure this bubble to the top of your list or something like that. And you just think, that's a sure way to delete. It's just completely me driven, and I think there's no room for that anymore, and people's bandwidth is getting a lot shorter, and they have very little tolerance for that. So just what you said about making sure you're relevant, making sure you're known, and you want to obviously know all these things to know that what you're putting out there is actually resonating with your target audience. This kind of segues us into where we want to go. So I guess it shows the importance of SEO to say, like, if we have an inbound marketing approach, there's effort, there's work, there's a lot that goes into it. How do we ensure that what we're putting in is actually resonating on the back end? So maybe, Chris, if you would just start by defining for those who are not in, as tech savvy as you are, like, what is SEO?
Before I do that, can I just talk a little bit about the components of inbound and how you can know what elements of inbound are working?
Absolutely.
So the way to think of inbound really is what traffic is getting to your website. And it's important that in any inbound strategy that you think the most important sort of piece of real estate is your website. All roads should lead to your website. And there are tools out there such as Google Analytics, which will tell you very easily what are the primary inbound channels that are creating traffic to your website. And there are just, there's 4 or 5 basic channels. There's what's called organic, which is search, which we're going to talk about in a second. There's social media, there's email, and there's referring sites, right? So that's the starting point for any inbound strategy is, what traffic are we getting to our site now? And hopefully, is it converting into something that, we want to see a conversion on? So SEO is something that every company, in my view, should be looking at, because search engine optimization is the term, but basically it's predicated on the fact that people are searching for something. And more often than not, they're searching on Google. So, and we all use it. I mean, think of yourself as a searcher. When you want to find an answer, you punch in, how do I, where can I, how much is it, blah, blah, blah. Those are all search terms you use as a consumer. Well, it happens in business too. You're not going to all of a sudden change your searching habits because all of a sudden you have your business hat on. So you want to somehow make it so that your website is found when people ask questions about things that your business can help them with, whether it's, whatever your business does, you want people to be able to find your website when asking questions about how to solve problems that your business can solve. Make sense?
It does make sense, Chris. It does. And I like when you said all roads lead to your website. Should lead to your website if you're doing it right.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal, right? So the goal is that you have in place a general understanding that search engine searches should factor into your inbound strategy. So you may hear the term search engine marketing, which is the more broader term that applies both to search engine optimization, which is organic search, and pay-per-click, which is paid search. So SEO is, we're not paying for traffic. We're just optimizing our website so that if somebody punches in a word like Zoom icebreakers, for example, just picking an example for one of our clients, that if you punch in Zoom icebreakers, one of our clients, Summit Team Building's posts will come up on page 1. So you're optimizing your content around that topic. So the next question is, well, why that topic? Well, you can't search engine optimize your site for every keyword on the planet. You should be search engine optimizing your website for popular keywords that aren't too competitive. And that's part of a search engine optimization strategy. So that's important for people to know, that in order for your site to be relevant and for people to want to go to it, your search terms that you're competing for should be relevant to your business and relevant to their search interests, as an example. So organic search is where we focus in on. We don't do much pay-per-click. So we don't buy access to keywords. We prefer for people to come to the website after finding one of our clients' posts or pages on a particular topic that's optimized for a keyword.
So, Chris, just if I can interject here, so you're creating content. Actually, first you're searching for the words that your target audience is searching for, and then you're embedding that in your content or throughout your website, so that when they're searching for those words, your website's coming up.
Correct. That's the goal. It also, what's really interesting about keyword research, which is a fundamental piece of SEO, is you start having a dialogue either internally or with an agency like ours about the types of things that you want to tell and educate your audience about. So, for example, if you are a company that specializes in finance and investments for specific industries, then you start thinking, okay, so what is it that we want to tell our audience about the industry they're in, about how to get financing in that industry, and some of the things to look for when, deciding who to get that financing from. You're building kind of like an editorial plan based on what you want to tell the audience, what you want, how you want to help them understand how to solve problems that your company can solve for them, or in some cases that they could solve themselves if they just read something that was very informative and helpful. So that's the relevance piece. It's got to be relevant to the audience in terms of what they're searching for, and it has to be relevant to what you do, as an example.
So are you creating content first and then reverse engineering it, checking that those are searchable words, or are you getting searchable words, a list of them, and saying, okay, out of these, where can I get content that's relevant, that's timely, and that also is part of the solution we provide?
It's funny. That's a great question because we've done both. So usually when we start with a client who maybe doesn't have a deep understanding of how SEO works, we generally will, for the first little while, just say, look, write what you think's important to write about. And this may contradict what some other folks would say, but we don't want to sort of paint them into a box where we say, go write about this keyword search word term. We'd rather them just write something that they're very passionate about. Don't worry about the length. Just go as long or as short as you think's going to cover the topic. Then we'll go out and see if there's a keyword, that it can compete for. And if it can't, then that's okay. But it will help us understand a little bit about their writing style, about the frequency in which they want to produce content. Then over time, we start educating them about, we say, look, here are the five different search terms that are tied to, say, virtual team building. And one of them is virtual team management. Write something around virtual team management that actually includes these other four terms that are related to team management, which is leadership and a couple of other things. So it is an iterative thing. And the last thing we want people to do is to get freaked out and start thinking about, writing for a search term before we know, what they want to write about. We give them guidance. But it's never one way or another way. It's never one, here's a bunch of keywords, go write for them. It's too robotic. It's not something that we generally advocate. Now, if there's already content on the website, we'll take a look at it and see if we can repurpose that content around a more popular search term. So let's say if it's about, it's online sales training, and we find out that actually the more popular term is virtual sales training, we would say to that person, well, it's probably better just to go in and, repurpose the content so that we're actually optimizing for virtual sales training. Don't keyword stuff, like have the keyword in 20 million times, use online and virtual interchangeably, but optimize for virtual sort of thing, and keep it human, readable, and don't make it look like it was put through a keyword machine.
And I think that's where the challenge is, Chris, is because when you're put inside that box, I feel that it stunts your creativity and your authenticity to just speak and share freely, and I think that's part of the engagement and the attractions when you can do that. So I think you're right in there. And I like the fact that I'm sure a lot of people, if they look at their website, they have content that, old blogs that they can repurpose and just, ensure that they can optimize some of that language because, that was a great example of what you just shared. Maybe just by changing the name, it's going to increase its, analytics and get where we need it to get on the Google page.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the most important thing when it comes to inbound marketing, because content is an important part of inbound marketing, it's the most important thing, because when a person's searching for something, they go to a website and there's content on it. Yes, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be text, it could be an image. So I think the biggest challenge for companies today is content development and publishing, and creating content, becoming a content producer, thinking of themselves as a digital magazine, and thinking themselves from an editorial standpoint, as opposed to, hey, we sell widgets and we sell solutions, and geez, we're now content developers and producers. That's the biggest problem, is whether they have the skills internally to write, to produce content, to do the things like you're doing, which is a high fidelity, high quality podcast. Like, it's new. So, inbound marketing is not just SEO. It's getting people to think about ways to communicate in new ways, thinking of the customer first, thinking about different types of content, thinking about what content consumes, and then optimizing it so people find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when you say that, I feel the role of a salesperson has shifted to, a content creator, and sharing insights and educating their customers or their prospects, to start building that relationship. So I feel that that's it. And what you said there is where it comes down to skills and communication. Do you think there's other challenges or other things holding them back there? Like, what I hear when I talk to people about not posting on LinkedIn, or just that visibility, and I'm afraid to put myself out there, and just that vulnerability piece. Do you think that plays a role in it as well, Chris?
I think as individuals, potentially. I think there are some company owners that don't want to be considered chatty. I've heard one company owner tell me that he doesn't want to be, chirping all the time about his company. And I understand that, they kind of want to be subtly out there, I guess, for lack of a better word. But that's honestly, in today's day and age, your company needs to use its website to show people that you're capable of doing the things that they need. Whether it's providing them with advanced financing, whether it's to provide them with legal services. I'm speaking obviously to our clients. You need to have content out there, and people need to be aware of it. So from an inbound perspective, SEO is one way to do that. I would argue that posting on LinkedIn is still an outbound tactic. It's truly not that. It's, in my mind, it's not an inbound thing. But getting back to your point about whether people are feel weird about posting, on LinkedIn as an example, because they're worried about what people will think, or they really don't want to expose themselves or say the wrong things. Yeah, that's a problem. That is a problem. And I think, a large percentage of people tend not to post. They'll read, they might comment, but the company needs to do something. And that's a question with, well, how best is it that we produce content, and, the author of the content could be the XYZ marketing team or the XYZ editorial team. It doesn't have to be the individual.
Yeah.
So that's an easy problem to address. The reality is that, people have always produced content even before the internet. There were brochures, spec sheets, letters. The content has always been something. A proposal is a piece of content. And in that proposal, you probably have about our company. Here are our references. Here's what makes us unique. Well, if it's in a proposal, can it be on your website? If you've had to send an email out 30 times about why us, and I'm sure there's tons of content that's that could possibly be put on a website that is in a bunch of sales reps or company owners' outbox, where they've talked about our value proposition, what makes us unique, what makes us different, that sort of stuff. So creating content isn't new. And if you look at it through that lens, it's just where it is and how it's promoted, where it's posted. That's changed. And I think with the 50-plussers or the 60-plussers that are still running companies and maybe sales departments, maybe marketing departments, just can't wrap their heads around all these things that we should be doing today with content and how to measure it and all the different technologies that we need. Do we need them? I think it causes inertia in some cases where they just put their hands up and go, okay, So it's something they need to wrap their heads around. In fact, I've said to any marketer is if you don't understand the technologies behind, what makes it possible for you to market your business, you need to understand what WordPress is. You need to understand, what technologies are out there that help you publish content, help you optimize content. In fact, in our framework, we have a framework we use. One of the components is the technologies and tools you use. And that's one side of the spectrum where the technologies and tools they don't understand them, so they don't really understand how to use them. The other side of the spectrum is they take on too many technologies and tools and it becomes a mess. It becomes a Frankenstein mess of technologies and tools, and they have no idea how they work, how they fit together. And this reminds me of the day when, marketing automation software came out and you'd register for an ebook, you'd get the ebook, and within 30 seconds, you'd get another automated email saying, now that you've read the ebook, how did you like it? And fill out this form and go to this webinar. And I'm sitting there going, well, I haven't read it. So you're a bit early. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a bit of feast or famine. Those who are, maybe there's a generational gap there that haven't really adopted the technology, and maybe they need a bit of a blended support from a blended team with some more tech savvy individuals, those who are not afraid to get in there and mix with the tech. And then I see the other side too, is where, there's companies that are thinking they're doing a good deed and throwing so much tech at it. But it's like when you don't actually know what's contributing to, positively or negatively, but there's also then it's a robot that's talking. There's no human element. And I think when you think about inbound and what's going to break through the noise, it's that connection. That's that humanized piece that people are looking for.
It's a pretty safe bet to say that younger people, younger professionals get technology, but it's a bit simplified because, they may understand how social networks work, how to post. But I would argue that you still need the more experienced, let's just call them 50-plussers, who understand, the discipline of marketing, how to sell professionally, how to sell using selling techniques that are designed to achieve, mutual benefit. So I think a mixed team is very important, where the person who may not understand the technology, but understands sales cycle lengths, the sophisticated sales techniques that work, some of the things that you teach sales professionals and leaders, how do we apply some of these things to the things that we're doing from a marketing perspective? So, and what tools do we need to make sure we're on the right track? And a good example is, a piece of content. So I think we're going to chat a little bit about this and around in terms of, what do you want the content to do? Like, what do you want people to do when they get to your website? And that's a really important part of SEO and inbound generally as well. We want them to learn that we're really good at what we do. Well, that's great. We want them to leave the website thinking that they perhaps are further knowledgeable about something that's going to make them more successful in their role, make their company maybe more successful. But what else do you want them to do? Do you want them to book an appointment? Do you want them to subscribe for a newsletter? Do you want them to somehow identify themselves beyond being an anonymous visitor of the website? So those types of discussions always need to be taking place, Even when you're talking about selling something new, is like, what do we want them to do? Who's our target audience? If they were to come to the website, do you want them to book an appointment? Well, if you want them to book an appointment, how do we measure that? How do we know what websites are referring traffic to our website that are converting into appointments? Those are the things that seem to get lost in the shuffle around, hey, there's this really cool tool that we can use to market, and we have all this data, and we've got lots of people on our website, but we really don't know whether they're converting. Well, that's great. But it's really important that you're always thinking about how the site is converting people and to do things you want them to do.
So those are all great points.
It's not rocket science.
Those are, well, to some it might be. And those are great points. And I love the call to action, because I think too often people are on websites and they're reading and it's knowledgeable and they've learned something, but there's no next step. Like, how do you bring them closer to, that conversion? Whether it's, as you said, is it a demo? Is it, sign up for a newsletter? And I think there's a gap there. But just as you said, Chris, the conversion. So what kind of metrics should people be looking for or focusing on? You mentioned conversion rate. What else should they be focusing on?
Well, we have this term called ABC, and it's the sort of a core analytics set of reports that are very important, especially for small to mid-sized companies. And A stands for acquisition, and B stands for behavior, and C stands for conversion. So we'll have a post on this later, but we don't have it up yet. But essentially, acquisition is, how are people finding our website? How are they getting to our website? And those are channels. And there is an acquisition report in Google Analytics. And I'm speaking of the current older version of Google Analytics, which everybody can still use. Bit of a segue, Google Analytics has come out with a new version called GA4, which is beyond beta. It's now going to be the ongoing Google Analytics platform heading forwards. But that doesn't mean that you can't use the older version of Google Analytics for this report package. So acquisition is who's coming to our website and where are they coming from. So are they coming from organic search? Are they coming from social channels? Are they coming from referring websites? Because you may get people coming to your website because your site's been linked from another website. Are they coming from social? So that's the acquisition piece. The next part is behavior. And behavior is, well, once they're here, what are they doing? How long are they on the site? How many pages are they? How are they on the site for? We have an index we like to have, which is a minimum of 2 minutes on the website and a minimum of 2 pages. So you want people to go deep into the site. You don't want them to just go to the homepage and take off. So time on site and number of pages on the site is really important. Obviously, you want people to go to your website and spend as much time as much time as possible consuming your content. And going to other areas of your website to become more educated about your brand, about what you offer, about what you know, what you're good at, that sort of thing. So that's the behavior piece. And then the conversion piece is you just factor in goals. If a goal is to, at this stage, we want to build an audience of people who actually want to give us their email addresses so that we can send them something that says, hey, we have a new content on our website. This is something new about our company. This is something new about one of our customers. That's one goal. Another goal is to book an appointment. You should always have the opportunity to book an appointment on your website, especially in a high complex sale, which is where we're focused on, complicated sales, where you're going to have to talk to somebody at some point in time. You're going to have to say, hey, I'm on your website. I'd like to talk a little bit about our situation. And, we're in the process of putting a budget together, et cetera, et cetera. And then something in the middle is newsletter is kind of like, hey, yeah, I guess I don't mind receiving some updates from this company. The next step is, hey, this is a really interesting blog post, and I see that I can get actually more information about this topic through a white paper, through a pretty meaty piece of document that will get them to opt into a piece of content that is relevant to them and perhaps relevant to what you're trying to do with your business. So let's say you do a white paper on, sales training for the diving industry, a really niche piece of content, sales training for the commercial diving industry. And you want to see if you can build a list of, commercial diving organizations, oil rigging platforms, all that sort of stuff. Then you would maybe have a piece of content that is meaty enough that they can read it without getting a more broader breakdown of what you're writing about. And that's usually done just to sort of see if there's interest in that piece of content and if you could sort of build a new segment of potential customers. So that kind of white papers is presentations, that sort of stuff. Now, the one thing is don't gate everything, because people won't give you any information if your offer isn't compelling enough and if you're asking for it too often. They'll decide. The other thing that sort of happens too is at some point in time, they're going to want to know who works at the company. So they go to your website, let's say they've gone through search, they're going to want to know the people. So I've always said to people, if you don't have your management team on the website, what are you hiding? They're going to want to know, this sounds like a great company, but people buy from people, especially in complex sales where they're making risky decisions. They're going to want to know who the owners are, who to contact, who they are. And that's where you introduce links to LinkedIn and Twitter and other social channels. If they're professionally focused, that's where they can sort of, I guess, subtly follow you, sort of, they can go to your LinkedIn profile. Maybe they follow, or, maybe they'll want to connect with you, that sort of thing.
I think, Chris, what that does is also, it gives you a bit of understanding of who's going to support me in this journey. Like what's their credibility? What have they done? And just that, otherwise it's blinded, especially in a complex sale where there's so many people, there's so many layers, there's so many, it's like a chess player. Like who's going to support me in this area? Who else have they worked with like us? It shows me that they're able to do what they're going to do, because I think now, the risk is high, and people like, if I'm going to give you my email, if I'm going to do something, like I need to make sure that I'm pretty sure that you guys are a good fit, right? People aren't just going to give their email for nothing.
Well, it's interesting. So you always have to look at the competition. So what I generally hear from is, we're not coming up on page one on search. So I think from a baby steps perspective, understanding what does that mean in their minds of if they're not coming up on page one, who is? And then finding out, why they're coming up on page one. And so baby steps for content development in general is the company really needs to explore whether they have the capacity to develop content internally or not, and whether they have the appetite to have content developed on a regular basis. If they don't, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. But if they do, then the next step is sort of deciding with them what it is that they think is important for them to produce content about. So that's another key discussion that needs to take place. What is it that they really want website visitors to read, to consume about the industry they're in, about what the company does, about how customers can have a better life, a better company by having a relationship with the client's company, as an example. Then we can get into the nitty-gritty about what we think it would take for them to get on page one, and we would look at competitors who are on page one for specific search term areas that we know are important. I mean, sales training, for example, in your world is a term that's potentially a keyword that could be competed for in your industry, as an example. I'm not saying it is definitely the case, but you kind of have a general idea of what keyword areas or keyword core phrases we should be aiming to produce content and optimize for, and then go from there. And going from there means establishing an editorial calendar, a general a consensus and agreement that a certain amount of content would be produced on a regular basis, and then we would have a reporting mechanism in place to track progress. And then over time, we would go over those reports and tweak things, or shake each other's hands and go, great, things are working. And last, it's really about keeping in touch. So we have weekly sessions where we talk about how things are going, what's happening next, that sort of thing. So that's how I would sort of sum up these baby steps. So the best way to find me is to do a search on Google for B2B specialist. That's B, the number 2, B specialist. And you're more than likely going to find me on page 1 with various places that you can go and either connect with me or check out places where I am. So B2B specialist, just do a search and a couple of places will come up. And the agency is mi6agency.com. It's been a pleasure having a chat with you, Karen, and I'm looking forward to hopefully folks having follow-up questions, which I'm happy to field in another forum of some sort. Perhaps we can have a Zoom session in the future or another podcast, or if I start a podcast, you'll be the first person I have on mind. Thanks a lot.
So I want to thank you very much, Chris, for your time and sharing your expertise and your insights as it relates to the importance of inbound marketing and really creating quality, customer-focused content, because that's ultimately what's going to drive the SEO results that you're looking for. So thank you to everybody who tuned in today. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share it, and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you have a suggestion on topics you'd like covered, guests you'd like to see on the show, please let us know on our website at k2perform.com. Thanks so much, and see you next time.